Okay. All right. Good morning, everyone. Uh, Welcome to the Met Section Education Seminar this morning. Thank you to the Met Section team for help setting this up. Um, I'd like to introduce you to two guys that I've been working with for the last couple of years, almost since the start of their business, John Halpert and David Ford. John is the managing director of Clip for the United States, and Ford, Davey, I got to read your thing here. It's too long. You're the worldwide head of coaching partnerships. That sounds like a big job. Guys, do me a favor and just kind of fill everybody in on what Clipped is and what you guys have been doing.
Yeah, so number one, good morning, everybody. Kevin, thank you, and thanks to the MGA for having David and I present here. Clipped is a business that's now been on the ground from October of 2022, and what Clipped in essence does is, at its core, is we try to unwind the mystery of information in golf. So we built a really sophisticated data analytic platform with some AI and all these kind of buzzwords that you all hear in technology to really help coaches and to help players make the journey to get better. And it does that by providing really interesting insights to their game and giving them some direction on what they do with those insights.
David?
Yeah, I think in terms of where we're at the moment, really looking at what's happening in lessons, obviously on the golf course and in practice. We've got a pretty deep vision into where we can take things, and for everybody on this call and sort of teachers more broadly, just really helping to leverage the value in any technology you're using. So we sort of see a world down the line whereby any sort of activity you do, we can actually understand the impact that's going to have on your golf. So, as it goes into more health integrations, those sorts of things, that's where we see things going, and really using Clipped as a tool to help you understand those things and just create efficiencies based around those really great tools that have been developed.
Yeah, I think, and John, you used the sentence mystery of information. And I think that's a great way to describe data sometimes. We've all known about data and kept stats in some respects, whether it be on a scorecard or created our own Excel spreadsheet, or now there's a whole slew of apps out there that help with that. And then when I think it really skyrocketed when I'm drawing a blank on his name, but when he came out with the strokes gained stats.
Professor Brody.
Yeah, Professor Brody. Thank you. So I think that kind of brought stats to kind of delight, because we all know that we hit this many greens and we do that, but stats are great, but what do we do with the data, right? I mean, what does it actually mean for the player? And John, I'll have you start with this. There's different types of players. I mean, we all, most of us work at country clubs or private and public facilities, and our players are, either weekend warriors or they play a couple times, and then you've got your high level players who are playing every day. And so how do you suggest using stats based upon different levels of players? And I know, and David, I'll have you jump in after, but I know you work with a lot of college teams and professionals. So John, why don't you start with that, and then David, why don't you follow up?
Yeah, first of all, I think that's really the essence of the question. And I think the good news is that I think we've all seen, and again, when we use the word statistics, so we use the term data analytics, so we use the term AI, all we are doing is saying there is really cool information that could be available to the marketplace. And we only view these things as tools, and we humbly view them as tools, right? So I think the good news is for the marketplace is that what we all considered stats, and you mentioned guys like Mark Brody, which is actually was a big step forward in the way that we looked at players' performance. So stats in golf have been very traditional, right? For forever, right? They've been almost non-changing for a very long time. Amount of birdies, amount of pars, what your score is, what your handicap is. I think that next level of development was that people started to be able to record what I would call shot level data. Shot level data is really beginning to measure, or giving the ability to measure, what every shot you take actually means. And again, the good news to that is that that stuff is getting easier as time goes on here. And there are some tools out there and technologies that, whether it be Garmin or Arcos, who all of you may be familiar with, are starting to take the journey, which making it easy to capture data. As it relates to our product currently, we actually serve and Sprex. I say Sprex, so Kevin actually mentioned it. That we service, what I would call performing or players that are interested in truly vested in getting better. And if we're able to get good inputs of information, we're not only able to turn around what I would call, you hit this many fairways, you hit this thing right, you hit this thing left, you're this relative to a tour player, you've hit this many greens and regulations. We can start defining how you play the game, how a player, and everyone plays this game differently. I mean, the greatest example of that is guys like Morikawa and Dustin Johnson. If you look at them play, they're almost playing a different sport, right? One's an incredible driver of the golf ball and hits wedges all day long, and the other one has to hit great mid irons and short irons to kind of score on a daily basis. So if we could start defining you as a player and drawing those correlations to how you score, we could start helping coach and player determine what they should be working on, what they could be most efficiently working on. But do know that we can't tell people how to swing the club. We can't tell people how to train to swing the club. All we are is providing that clarity of guidance of what they could and should be doing to take this journey to get better.
Right. Yeah, I mean, for as long as I've been using the information that you guys provide, it helps me develop practice programs based upon what the player is doing. One of the things when we first talked about 3 years ago, we were talking about information and how we can take the data that a player inputs into their system and help tailor practice for whatever course that they're going to, whether they're going to go play a Bethpage Black, which is you got to hit a lot of long iron shots in the greens, or if you're going to go play something that's a little bit shorter, where you've got a lot of wedges in. You get to see, and we'll show everybody some of the data, but you get to see where your strengths and weaknesses really are. I always find when someone comes for a lesson, they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm really good from 25 to 50 yards, but I kind of struggle from 75 to 100." And we pull up their data, and it's almost the opposite. They're really good at the 75-yard shot, not so good in there. So it gives players insights to what they're doing. David, go into a little bit on how you see some of the higher level players using data that you've worked with.
Yeah, I think, and to your point there, it's those internal narratives that we create as players. We've all been guilty of it. We've played golf for long enough between us, are often a long way from the truth, and that's true across the better players as well. And I think, for a lot of those better players, it's having that validation as to, okay, what are they doing well? What aren't they doing well? But really, having data that's accurate and objective means that they can be way more efficient with their time. They can be, very effective. Whether it's, we're looking at college players and, someone like Georgia Tech, where there's, certainly a high requirement on academics, they've got to be pretty efficient with their time. So they need to practice the right things, and, they're using the data to practice smart, to work on areas that are going to be important on venues they're playing, and they're able to validate, progress as well. So any changes they make. So we're able to surface a lot of important trends and tendencies very quickly. So they were referring to it in terms of how they build practice plans, what the work on feature that you mentioned, Kevin, and even, the smallest changes in equipment, they're logging all of that in there so they can really track that sort of those changes, validate any changes they make. So I think it's a combination of those things, really making sure that not just what's happening on the golf course, but those other elements, equipment, also practice, creating some sort of training tests and games as well, and monitoring that, and really, creating a little bit of a competitive environment away from the golf course so they can hone the skills as sharply as possible. So they're kind of using it, across those different environments.
Yeah, it's interesting you brought up equipment, because I was at the PGA show. I was talking with a coach who works with some LPGA players, and one of his players, she just kept hitting it left, no matter what they did. And when they looked at their data, all of her mid-iron shots were definitely left tendencies on misses. And what they figured out was her lie angles were way off, which to me was kind of surprising, because somebody at that level wouldn't really know. Somebody and that player's team would know that, but when they start seeing all the trending data, and I think she had recently switched clubs, and the trending data was that, and they flattened out her clubs, and she went on to, her data started to get better. Guys, your guys are at the forefront of data collection, data analysis, and everything. And first question is, David, I'll have you start with this. What are some of the trends that you're starting to see with data? Because it's not like it used to be, 10, 15 years ago, where like I started, we were, putts per green and greens in regulation. Those were kind of basic stats. What are you starting to see now, especially with, the kind of the new term around here is AI. Everybody's talking about AI doing this and doing that. And I know you guys integrate that into your programming. So what are some of the things that you guys see?
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely seeing that, the data collection, it's not sort of a nice to have, it's a must have. If you're certainly at the higher level of the game, you've got to really understand that data. And strokes gained has obviously been a really, big step forwards in terms of understanding performance. So we're seeing, much more sort of detailed data entry in a lot of senses. And I think as, platforms like ours have come along, we're not just presenting numbers where, a lot of golfers aren't necessarily that sort of good with the numbers. They're not necessarily that skilled at interpreting the data. So, we're able to really visualize it in a much more simple way. And so I think, and that's always been a challenge that, I've heard from a lot of instructors and coaches, is it's really difficult to get players to buy into collecting data. And one of the challenges is presenting in a way that's easy for them to consume and understand. The other challenge is making it easy for them to obviously collect that data. And so, systems like Arcos, like Garmin watches, make it a lot easier. We certainly see technology being a pathway towards, more people collecting that data. Your country club members, a lot of the members that everybody on this call will be teaching. It will just make that a lot easier. But I think just the way it's being presented now is certainly making it more sort of beneficial for people to collect that data, and then they're going a little bit deeper. So not just those sort of traditional stats, but trying to understand the depths, because as you all know, the more information you can get as an instructor, the more efficient you can be during those lessons. And I think technology is really helping with that. And we're trying to step a few paces beyond that and actually say not just what's happened. And the AI really comes into its own when we can say, this is you as a player, and this is how you should be looking forwards. And I guess that's the difference between analytics and traditional statistics. So there's been a big change these last few years.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, as a coach, prior to data collection, we all use some kind of a launch monitor or some kind of a system to measure basically what a player is doing. The launch monitors don't tell us how to fix a player. They just say, here's what's going on. And it's up to the coach and the player to decide how to use that data. And I think data collection, like what you guys are doing for stats, is kind of the same thing. It's a tool. It doesn't tell the players, like Johnny, you pointed out, it doesn't tell them how to, it doesn't coach them. It just says, look, here's what you're doing. And then it's up to the player and the coach to decide how to use that data. John, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, Kev, I think it's important. I think it's important to note, like, as time goes forward in this technology journey in golf, in essence, and I really think we're at a very exciting time, is where you finally have technologies that are really thinking about not only what they provide, but ultimately how they impact coaches and players, right? Like, right. When video came along, like, oh, if I don't have video, I'm uncompetitive. Well, what am I doing with video? Well, it became apparent what you're doing with video. And then the the Sims and the launch monitors came along, and everyone said, "Oh, if I don't have that, what?" But now I think coaches and players are starting to understand, just like you mentioned, is how you start using that information to start effectuating how you coach and how you play. And because we started in this business of what I would call the performance side of the game, meaning, we're working with 100 and some odd Division I college programs. We're working with hundreds of what I would call academy, Uber teachers, people that are teaching largely aspirational players, not those that are just looking to fix their slice, but people that are, and again, it makes sense because they're always the early adopters of those that are looking to make the journey to become a better player. And I believe that shot level information and this data analytics layer is like, if you're not taking video, if you don't have access to Launch Monitor, if you don't have the wherewithal to follow up with your coach and practice what you're doing, if you don't meet those requirements, or if you're not collecting on-course data, I think the marketplace is now starting to tell us you're starting to become unqualified to make the journey as a good player. It's a have to do. It's a disadvantage if you don't. And I think what we're trying to dispel is not that you can't enjoy the game of golf without this stuff. That's not what we're saying. Like John Halpern has a 7.5 index. At this point in time, does not have to grind his statistics to become a better player. But if I'm working with a pro and I'm going to lessons on a monthly basis or a weekly basis or a bi-weekly basis or whatever I'm doing, and if I don't have practice plan accompanied with that, with accountability and the ability to measure my progress, and because we can provide things like AI and dispel silly terms like AI is just a machine taking multiple pieces of information, running them through some magical potion, and delivering back really clean and correlated and interesting information that can affect the way you teach and the way you play. And that's really, to me, this trend of where data is going. And I think it's been driven by, like every other thing in golf, it's been driven by the top of the game. And I don't mean monetarily the top of the game, but those that are really good players. And then that goes down to junior markets, and it goes down to the aspiring 12-year-old kid who's looking to make his high school team or, be as good as he can be. And, the amateur that's looking to be competitive on, in the club state, in the club marketplace.
Sure.
And I think that's just the natural progression of good technology.
Yeah, no, I agree. Let's John, let's pull up a screen and show people what Data Clipped has there. And why he does that. If anybody has any questions, feel free to throw a question into the chat box and we'll get to it.
Make sure, tell me you guys can see this stuff. You guys all see what I'm looking at?
Yep. Yeah, I think one of the challenges, and I've spoken to you guys about this, is getting players to actually do the data. And I tell them, especially for my high school players, look, it's a way to present to a coach, a college coach, say, look, coach, here are my stats when I was a freshman. And you can see my it just kind of gives you progressive data if they do it long enough on how they progressively get a little bit better here and there. And it's just, I think it's actually a useful recruiting tool for a lot of kids who want to play at the college level. And then it's just it's just another way to see, really, to evaluate your game. You walk off the course and you do whatever, but really how are you doing, and are you getting better? And as a coach, I use it to see where they're getting better and we're not getting better.
Yeah.
John, go ahead, and John, let's go through this. And
I think that's a great comment. Like if you have junior players that you're teaching that aspire to play at any college level, I would say today that in the Division I space, 100%, maybe 99% of every player is playing Division I golf is collecting on-course data, meaning they are recording every practice round, every tournament round, every qualifying round. to be able to give them some insights into how they play the game. Doesn't mean they're all using Clip, but they're all doing that. The percentages probably deteriorate a little bit at the moment as you get downstream in market. If I was going to guess, Division II, it's 80%, Division III, it's 50%, and so on and so forth down to junior college. All of these things, if you have a kid who's a junior player and they say, I don't want to collect stats, I would turn around to the kid and go, hey, if you aspire to be any of these other kids that are out there, you got to do what they're doing at minimum. And that's what they're doing. So I showed you a screen here. This is really, I think, this screen here is what we call the, a funny word is donut of truth, Kevin. It's like how this is the culmination of what an output would be in our system if someone collected or put their TrackMan data in system, if they started collecting on-course data, and we give them a very simple way to do it. If they started uploading all that information, and after 3 rounds of golf, we can start delivering this donut of truth. And this donut of truth is really telling us how an individual will ultimately play the game. What things correlate to scoring? Meaning, when you're playing your best rounds of golf, what elements are driving those best rounds of golf? And the same goes to your worst rounds of golf. What elements are driving the worst rounds of golf? And I think if you look at some of the examples up here, we use these examples because people can visualize how these folks play the game. The only one you can't visualize how they play the game is David Ford, who's donut number 4 here on the right. I probably have more donuts here, but that's what I'm seeing on screen. So if I go to someone like Colin Morikawa, if we're able to get shot level data from Colin Morikawa, and we do, we have every round that he's played in tournaments over the last 5 years, and we do that through ShotLink data, we could start defining what his superpowers are and what things truly correlate to good scoring. So Colin Morikawa, believe it or not, his off the tee play it's somewhat irrelevant correlated to the way he's scoring. Now, when I say that, it doesn't mean that he doesn't have to work on his off the tee play, but he has such little variability and or effect on whether he drives the ball in his mind well or not well, and how that affects how he plays. On the counter of that, if he's not hitting his approach irons really well, he has no chance of being competitive in a golf tournament. Absolutely no chance, right? As opposed to someone like Brooks Koepka, who, and again, Morikawa relies a lot on his putting because he's not as long, so maybe his iron play gets him to certain ranges within striking distance, but if he putts well, he actually starts making a few more putts and he actually finds himself in a great place. Brooks Koepka, on the other hand, his putting means nothing. Actually, it doesn't mean a lot. He almost putts the same all the time. It always comes down to his approach play. It's how far he winds up from the hole. His off the tee play has some relevance, but he is so uber driven by his approach play. So we take these kind of wheels and we start creating practice plans or what they need to work on based upon how they play the game. And I think, Kevin, everyone here knows that everyone plays the game differently. Is that a fair assumption in your experience? Like all of your students, everyone you've ever played golf with plays the game slightly differently.
Absolutely. But what's interesting is the thing that is the same for all of them is they all and everyone on here will probably attest to this. Anyone who shows up for a lesson is they want to work on their driver.
That's right. Right. So
I need to hit my driver better.
One of the things, the culture that we're trying to change, and if you went to a college practice or you went to like an academy practice, every kid would go out, let me hit some drivers, let me knock some 7-irons, and let me hit some putts. But we all know with limited time and limited ability to work on our games, if you could be more efficient in the time that you spend on the areas of the game that truly correlate to you getting better or scoring better, you unquestionably have a better chance of improving and moving the needle. So from those donuts of truth, we get to this thing called what to work on, and that's exactly what we spoke about. So it's impossible for the human mind to create, like, from a bunch of different data sets and a bunch of different data points, whether it be your TrackMan sessions, whether it be your tournament sessions, where, you know, all of your on-course statistics, to start thinking about, okay, how do all of these elements wind up correlating to scoring, and how do they ultimately wind up in defining what I need to work on to affect that scoring? So that's what our technology does in a nutshell. Again, provides this incredibly strong tool, coach, player, you're working on the same amount of information, you understand what happened in the past week, you understand what happened over the past 6 months, you know where they've been, you know where they're going, and all of a sudden the machine is starting to make recommendations as to, because of how you play the game, and if you're interested in improving your scoring, let's go dive into the elements that can do that. And it may recommend approach work. It may recommend approach ladders from different distance buckets. It may recommend putting. It may recommend OTT, off the tee play. It may recommend that you work on your chipping. It all depends on how you play the game and how that correlates to you being the best performer that you can.
Perfect. And there was a question that says the most efficient and least manual entryway to collect data. So I believe, and tell me if I'm wrong, but I think right now you have data integration from the Garmin and from Arccos for on-course play. Is that correct?
Yeah, and this is a very, very interesting question. Like, this to me is that if there's one friction place in the market, if everyone can get on-course data seamlessly, everyone would obviously do it because it's incredible output. So it does become more difficult without technology for a high handicap player to truly get on-course data. We have found that good aspiring players have much better acumen and can, with what we consider good enough accuracy, recount their round post-round. Maybe they take some notes, maybe they fill out a couple of marks on a scorecard. We provide them tools to do that. But in our college experience, no one is collecting this data on golf course. They're actually subsequent to round, going through their scorecard, reliving every shot that they've hit, and because they're a good player, are able to do that. The technology really helps for young juniors, you know, something like Arccos, where you're actually hitting a shot and you're automatically recording that shot level data, and a little bit of higher handicaps who, like me, can't remember what happened 5 minutes ago, you know, let alone what happened on hole 3, you know, 2 hours ago. But giving them those technology tools to enhance that will only allow more of the golf community to participate in great information like this. Does that make sense, Kevin? Has that been your experience with your players?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's, for me with my high school kids, it's a pain point because, they want to collect the data. I want them to collect the data, but they don't want to sit down after the round and do it. And it's just getting them trained to do it. And because even the manual way, even though it's not that, doesn't take that much time. It's like 5 minutes after you round.
That's right.
I mean, they probably talk with their buddies more about how they played more than, longer than they do about putting the data in. So it's just getting them to put it in. Let's John, let's go a little bit deeper into the data here, if you can, and kind of break down the different areas of like the screen that we're looking at there. Let's get into it a little bit and how we can use that as coaches to help our players.
Yeah, and I actually think if we back up a step, I think it's important. You know, one of the things that we've done really well as data scientists, right? And 40 and I are not data scientists. We're just trying to communicate what the data science is doing. So let's qualify that. But I think what we've done really well is that we've created the ability to measure the quality of any given shot under any conditions, under any golf course conditions. When I say conditions, weather conditions, golf course conditions, and anywhere in the world. And I think we would all agree that a shot in beautiful conditions, perfect conditions, i.e. in a launch monitor, is different than hitting a shot in 30-mile-an-hour wind with rain and expecting the same result from what happens on the launch monitor or on the practice range. So we've actually created a measurement that allows us to take all of that context and give it back to the player. So if you're a junior player playing in Florida, or you're a junior player playing up in northern New York in different conditions, we can actually start measuring how they truly match up against each other, as opposed to just telling them like their scoring average is whatever it is. Like, my scoring average is better than theirs. Well, if I'm playing a pitch and putt and that guy's playing a, Bethpage Black, your scoring average is not the relevant measure, right? It's like how good have you hit your actual shots, right? So, one of the examples, we use a metric of 0 to 200. 100 being tour average. I know that sounds, not intuitive, but 100 being tour average, it allows us enough breadth on both sides of what a tour average shot is, and nothing special. We got our tour average based upon using ShotLink data, from going back now 8 years on all tours around the world, and we were able to create just about every shot in every situation and put an average of what that result looks like. So a shot from 120. What's the average tour result in perfect weather conditions, etc.? We know what that is. And then we say a 0 is, a shot out of bounds. Not that different than the strokes thing. It doesn't improve your positioning on the golf course, right? That can get a 0. And then 200 is, in essence, statistical perfection. Everyone has the ability at one point to hit a 200 level shot, right? Or a 180 level shot, like a 10-foot putt make could be scored as a 150, because if you make a 10-foot putt, by the way, tour average is not to make a 10-foot putt every time, so you're above that 100 average. So I don't want to think that we have this tour average number and no one exceeds that ever. But as you aggregate these shots, you start really understanding how good any given shot was in practice, on a launch monitor, on the smart range, on your regular range, on the chipping green, on the putting test, and obviously in competition or when you're out playing golf. So here's an example of a shot, 120 yards to, I got to move our pictures to tell me how many feet, to 15 feet, sunny, no wind, 8-foot elevation. We get a shot quality of 103. And then if we go to the next slide, I think, why can't I go to the next slide? Oh, we can do it in rain and we can see what changes. That same shot from 120 yards, because of the difficulty of the conditions layered into the context of that shot, actually raises the quality of that shot. So that may sound like trivial in others, but what that allows us to do is truly allow players to truly understand their skill level at any given point of time. And it actually starts becoming not just a historical analytic, it starts predicting how a player will play that next shot based upon all of the past data. Does that make sense? Is that something that we may have some questions on? Because I think that's fundamental into how we kind of build this system here, this idea of shot quality. It's kind of this next level progression to strokes gained.
Yeah, and the shot quality, does it take in different lies on? I'm going to say like a shot versus, in the first cutter off versus the second cutter off, or from a fairway, takes in all that into account, right? Because that adds a level of difficulty.
Absolutely. So anything that layers in context to that shot, it can consider. So that requires just input. In essence, the person says, where was the shot from? It was from rough, deep rough, etc. We have all these kind of parameters. Wind, no wind, sunny, not sunny, rainy, and all this stuff is automatically programmed in when you're doing a round of golf. We're not asking for that context on every shot. We're able to kind of put broad assumptions in place based upon the conditions of the golf course on a given day.
Yep. Okay. Perfect.
And all that stuff, all that information, all of that shot level data, again, starts rolling up these measurements. You see these numbers on the screen like 93, 95, 81, 70, 93. All these is all of those shots that, remember, scale of 0 to 200, Kevin, 0 to 200, right? 100 being tour average. all it's doing is aggregating them by sections of your game. So it's defining you and starts telling you where you are, what your skill level is in all aspects of those games. We consider around the green 50 yards and in from the green complex is your ARG. And if you
John,
break,
can you go back a couple? Can you go back to that first screen with the shot quality, with the no wind, and
Yeah.
oh, right there. Interesting question here is why the shot from 140 yards to the same distance, the same elevation. Why is the shot quality lower than the one from 120 yards?
So that's, Kevin, I'll sort of jump in there. So that's really looking at
Yeah.
the hazards around there. So obviously we've got those 2 deep bunkers around that front left pin position. And sort of considering actually accessing that pin is a more challenging shot than the one towards the back of the green, where you've got, yeah, admittedly there is one bunker out to the right there, but there's certainly a lot more sort of real estate to play with to that pin position.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so it really takes in all the the difficulty of the shot, not just the distance and where it is too.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. Perfect. Yeah. So it's very, look, one of the things I like about it is very detailed. It gets into every little bit of aspect, and it's easy to go down rabbit holes with this, with the data information you guys provide. But you can look at it at a macro level and just kind of like you look at this screen here, you look at it at a macro and see what's going on, and then you can really dive into it, which is what I want to get into a little bit. John, go through this player quality here, and then let's really dive into it a little bit.
Yeah, so I think that's a really great point. We don't make the assumption that everyone is a no, I don't mean to offend anybody, but a gearhead, right? Like, let's put Spreck in that category. Spreck loves the diving into technology. He loves the journey. He loves the research. Well, a lot of people are just not wired that way, right? They're just not. They just can't get themselves to go there. But with that being said, they should be able to get the same level of information delivered in a way that suits them. And we've tried to make these things as visual as possible, right? So as you can see here on this screen, like I mentioned, this 93 is like your overall player quality. That's all of the elements of your game rolled up, and at a current time, you're approaching, tour level. A 15 handicapper or a 10 handicapper or a young kid who's beginning that journey, he may see numbers like 65 and 68 and 67, but it's not about where you are on the 0 to 200 scale. It's where you are going, and is it measurable? Are you improving? Are the things that we're teaching make an effect? So all of these things are trend lined, and you could see different elements of your game. Are you getting better? Is the new equipment that you bought helping you get better? Is your injury maybe causing you some problems in how you're playing? Is our new physical fitness plan, because I'm now able to turn and make a real turn? Am I now improving on my approach play? We're able to layer in all of this context so you can have real intervention discussions with your player. And all those other 4 rings are OTT is off the tee, obviously. APP is approach, ARG is around the green, and PUTT is putting. And it actually just starts breaking out. If you wanted to click through, someone like Kevin with his players would probably click through, and you can go down an incredible rabbit hole. Like, what are your tendencies of misses, and where are your best buckets of performance? And it's endless in essence. But
Yeah, but and I want to go into that, John. I want to go into that a little bit for everyone so they can kind of see what they can do here.
Do you want to go into the live app, Kevin, and open up, say, expose my game and dive in?
Yeah, or we can do my game. You want me to share my screen, John?
Wouldn't want to put you through that, Kevin.
Yeah, let 40 drive, Kevin. Let 40 drive that a little bit.
All right, good, David.
Okay, just if Johnny.
What do I need to do? Unshare.
Yeah.
New share. Okay. Or am I off? Yeah. There you go.
Okay, so
I think this is kind of where the magic happens. The data collection, and everyone knows data is important and it's whatever, but it's how do we use it and what does it mean? And I think it's pretty. I've used several different stats apps, and I think it's pretty impressive with how intricate that clip gets, but also how user friendly it can be. My test is, can my mom look on this and see how she's doing? Or can I take a high level junior player and keep them both interested in understanding what's going on and how to get better?
Yeah, and I think that's the key. So, obviously, as John just mentioned, we can see where my game's at here, the what to work on. I think, Kevin, you wanted to dive into a little bit more detail on that side of things. And we've obviously got this ring here. Let's just go in here and look at my data. Now, we kind of know that probably most players are going to be on their mobile phone, and they're not necessarily going to be wanting to go straight down into the weeds of things, as we've mentioned. So this screen is my computer screen, so it's showing us a lot of information. If we were just looking on mobile, for example, we would see, hang on, something a little bit more like that, where you just got that sort of simple list. Now, obviously, that's what this is giving us, is that ring, the donut of truth, as we've mentioned before. And underneath here, if we just concentrate on the left side of the screen here, this is a list, and this, you'll notice this is every area of the game kind of broken down into sort of nice bite-sized chunks, approach, down through putting, all through. There's about 15 different categories there. And this list isn't necessarily just about sort of highlighting weaknesses. It's about showing us actually what is that priority list? What's the most efficient way of improving our scoring? So we can see right at the top of that list for me is this sort of mid-iron approach, I guess, short to mid-irons, 140 to 180. Now, if I click on any of these, all the information on the right here is based around that tab I've just clicked on. So I'll go back to that 140 to 180. It's the most important area for me to focus on. All of this information just gives us the opportunity to go a little bit more specific, analyze things a little bit more deeply. So whether it's just looking at that trend over time, things were going great for me for a while there, and then more recently have just dropped off, just flattened out. We can maybe be a little bit more specific in terms of distances here as well. And the way we kind of arrive at this priority list, it's not just about, as I mentioned before, you're not so good at these 50 to 75 yard shots. You've got to incorporate how many times you actually hit these shots. How consistent are you with these shots? These are things which are obviously key to optimizing time. And I think this is where it becomes more analytics rather than just statistics, which can often be misinterpreted. So, in terms of how we're looking at this and, how you might look at this as an instructor, if you've got me coming in for a lesson tomorrow, Kevin, I don't need to tell you that, I had a terrible putting round the last round, or I blew a drive out of bounds, and start going down the wrong pathway of, I want to work on my driver, like you mentioned before. You can look at this and go, okay, well, we know exactly from the data what we should be focusing on. So, if we just sort of go a little bit deeper into this 140 to 180, we can see, yeah, potentially I'm a little bit weaker on that 140 to 160. So maybe we're being a little bit more specific there. This shot quality range is something we provide for every round. And this is in terms of 120 plus, and that's world-class shots. How many of those do you hit? This is across the last 20 rounds. Around tour average. This is below average, and then poor shots. So you can see I'm pretty inconsistent there. So that means that the outcome is far from certain whenever I've got a shot in this distance range. We can look at more detail in terms of how do I perform from these different start lies. So I actually hit a lot more greens when I'm playing from the fairway than I do on the par threes. So already for me that's sort of raises a little bit of a question mark as to what am I doing on the tees on the par threes? Am I making it harder for myself? We can go down into way more specifics in terms of missed tendencies, even proximities down here. So depending on whether you just want to stick at the surface level up here and just say, okay, I'm going to take, we're going to focus the next lesson on these areas. I'm going to make sure whenever I'm doing tests, on my TrackMan, on my launch monitor, even manually, I'm testing myself in these areas. So we can just tailor that practice much more specifically. And I know you've been using that for your students, Kevin. You're tailoring those practice plans. So I mean, how have you found that yourself and for the students?
I mean, this is where I go, right? I start on the dashboard and then I go right into the screen where I pick out, one of these areas and just find the trends. I actually like this shot, start, and end lines for me. Like, just looking at your data here, I mean, you're so much better from the fairway than the rough. So, that to me is interesting. And from the, you're better off from the fairway from the tee box, which someone put a little comment and maybe teed a little bit lower. But that could be just how you manage your game, because maybe that's, maybe you're on the tee and you're thinking about I think a lot of us we think differently when we're on the tee versus the fairway. And maybe it's the way you position yourself on the tee. Instead, you play a little draw, but you're teeing off on the right side of the tee box. So it gives you a bad angle. Those are things that, for me, when I start seeing that, that's when I want to go on in the course with the player and say, hey, what's going on? What are you doing and why? What are you thinking about? And then I get to see what you're actually doing. So these are little tidbits that this might not come out in a conversation. We all interview our students before a lesson or whatever, and this might not come out. But if I have this information prior to the lesson or for somebody that I'm working with, that's like, all right, today we're going on the course. Because
Kevin,
this is where we can improve things.
I think that's really, if you're going to say if you're going to ask me what is the most powerful part of this kind of analysis, it's being on the same page and being to have meaningful interventions with your player, right? Working off of the same information, working off of a grounded set of analysis that it may not be skill. It may be, as you mentioned, mental. It may be, what is your mindset? What were you thinking about? What is your strategy when you were trying to cut the corner on, hole 14 and you hit that tree and you wound up with a terrible shot? Well, it wasn't a matter of skill. You actually may have completely bombed that drive perfectly, right? But maybe it was a strategic intervention. I think what it allows coach and player to do at every level is, number one, save time, because you're prepared. You don't have to go through that 20 minutes of, what's going on, how you feeling. Two, it puts everyone on the same factual page. Like, if you look at our country, one of our challenges is no one's on the same factual page. Well, at least in golf, if we could put ourselves on the same factual page, we could start making interesting decisions together as it relates to how we take that journey. I think that at the end of the day is the most powerful piece about really good information. I really do.
Right. Yeah. And here's a very good question is does the system highlight players' tendencies on particular holes, whether it be a dogleg left or a dogleg right, or do they, are there certain pin placements that players struggle with? I mean, I'm going to date myself here, but I know when I used to work for Jim McLean way back when, and we used to watch, and Bruce Litsky was a buddy of his, and anytime that there was a pin on the left side of the green, Bruce just couldn't go for it. He, if you don't know Litsky, he hits a fade. His draw was a 4-yard fade, and his straight shot was a 10-yard fade. And so if there was a pin on the left side of the green, he just couldn't go for it. Where so does the data collection stuff that you guys have, does it go that deep to pin placements and different different stuff like that?
So yeah, we do have that more detailed, and we sort of, within our data collection, we kind of term it the fast mode, which is that kind of 4 or 5 minutes for a round, and then we've got the enhanced data, which is probably closer to 10 minutes. So within the enhanced data, we do have the more specific information in terms of, where is the pin, obviously where have you hit it into green portions, for example. And as with a lot of the sort of elements that we develop in here, we test it, we get feedback. And so, we've had that in play for a few months now. But those sort of approach specific elements and, even off the tee, we're not showing them in app at the moment, but just to sort of give you an example of some of the more enhanced data that we did test and test outputs and have collected. I'll show you with putting now, for example. So I've just highlighted putting here. We look at the enhanced data. Now we can look at, what are things like my speed control, my miss tendencies like? And we should probably get into this in time, but I've been to a multitude of putting specialists, and very early in the conversation, it comes up, what are your tendencies for misses? And I've just shrugged my shoulders. I go, I've got no idea. But because I've been able to collect it in clip now, I can just see it straight away and see that, okay, well, right to left putts, I'm missing them low all day long. I've got, basically under reading those putts, and I do know that I do have a little bit of a tendency to pull putts as well. And we can kind of see that down here with, in terms of shot quality, I'm much better on those left to right putts than I am on the right to left putts. So this kind of, semi answers that question, that it's data we're collecting for the longer shots. And we're just sort of testing out a few ways of how best to present that. Because obviously it's important not to just throw it down on a page. We want to present it in the best way possible, get feedback on that.
Yeah. How many rounds do you guys like to have before you really start looking at data?
Yeah, go ahead, David.
Yeah, so we require at least 3 to get to this what to work on analysis. And obviously that's still quite a small data set. And I think, certainly when you've got 10 rounds in here, you've really got a pretty robust data set. And one of the things that, was an objective of the metrics was to be able to identify the DNA, the trends of a player much faster. You typically need a lot more data with traditional stats or strokes gained. And that's why we can pretty confidently understand a player much quicker. So even from 3 rounds, but you kind of want people to have gone through a few different scenarios. So I'd say 10 rounds is a pretty good basis.
Yeah. And look, having all this data is great, but and sometimes it's helpful, but too much data can be bad, right? Would you agree? Of having too much information? Like how do you see with all the data, with all the players that you've worked with and coaches and everything, what are some of the pitfalls of having all this data? Or are there any, for that matter?
Well, I think traditionally statistics can be interpreted in a number of different ways. And I think that's where we don't tend to necessarily leave too much to interpretation. That's where the machine learning, the AI comes in, and actually why we create this what to work on, to kind of overcome a lot of the misinformation that's in there. So I guess, there are opportunities to get right down to the rabbit holes in here. And I would certainly encourage, from a player perspective, to start at quite a high level. So obviously getting those first rounds in, looking at those 5 numbers on the dashboard, and then this what to work on, which most of them would be looking at on their mobile phone. And I think using this as a really good structure is the best way to start off. And I think, in terms of the pitfalls, I don't think there's too many negatives, but it's almost, you can kind of get lost time-wise if you really want to go down the rabbit holes. And I think that's what we wanted to make sure, that when we're presenting information, that it's not going to be misleading at all. And that's why what to work on kind of factors in a lot of those things, overcomes a lot of those sort of the misinterpreted bits, like 50 75 yards. Yeah, I'm not great at that, and I could be working for hours on that area of the game, but is it actually going to help me? No, not so much, because I know to avoid those shots. I don't hit too many of them.
Right.
So that's where we're trying to overcome that by presenting it in a way that is a little bit more intuitive.
Kevin, to add to that, we've actually embedded a bunch of engagement tools in here, and we don't always know what's going to ultimately engage the player. But I think one thing that we found out through interviews and others, that self-exploration is often best. I think it's a mistake for a coach, and to Forty's point, right out of the box, go like, hey, let's get in this thing. Let's dive all the way in and let's go. Like it's almost a tool that's designed to be a little self-realizing. So like some of our college players who have used it, and like everyone else, 19-year-olds are a pain in the butt in some respect, right? So, you know, some of those kids were saying, I'm not doing this. Why am I doing this? What's the reason? And inevitably time would go by and 80% of the team is using it and they start talking about, oh, I had a 162 and a 148 and a 135. And the person would inevitably turn to them and go, what are you talking about? I don't even know what you're talking about. And they said, oh, those are my 3 best shots today. My approach on number 7 and my drive on number 4 and my putt on number 16 were my 3 best shots. Well, that player happened to have been the #1 player, women's player in the country who was not engaged. And she was playing at Wake Forest. And about mid-season, it clicked into her that, wow, let me just dip my toes in here. And now she's on tour, and now she's probably one of our most prolific users of the system because it was done via a little self-exploration. And we built stuff in here to make it engaging. We're not sure what's always good, but that's one engaging tool, like this kind of gamified view of your game in some respects. Sometimes draws you in and kind of starts allowing you to leverage the system appropriately.
Yeah, no, I agree. Dave, could you do me a favor and show the attendees how you guys manually input data into your system?
Yeah, sure. So I just pull this up and I'll get rid of some of these other windows that are lying behind here. I should have been more prepared here, but actually this one I just started before. So this is just showing you how it looks on mobile phone, and I should really log in, be helpful. So obviously we have a choice. We also have these practice games in here, but we're adding around in here. So you can search for any golf course in here. You know, obviously I've got some sort of recent ones that I've searched for in here. So I'll choose my home golf course. And, you know, obviously you've got your choice of tees in here. Let's say I'm testing myself from the back tees. You know, we've got an option to change the names of any entries in here. And then we also do specify between tournament rounds, qualifying rounds, obviously very relevant in that college space, and practice rounds. So those 5 rings we see at the top of a player's dashboard, a tournament round would have more impact than, say, a practice round. And again, say a test that you might do on TrackMan. So that's why we put them in there, but also you can sort of separate them out when we're looking at analytics. We've also included simulator golf in here where you can, you know, basically ignore shots within a certain distance of the hole as well. And then we automatically pull in temperature and altitude. At the moment, we ask the player to just enter in, you know, some of these weather details. All of this information you can set up. And then the fast mode, I guess, is probably the most popular to start with. If we just go in, it's just asking you, okay, what club did you hit from the tee? I've hit driver. Where did that ball finish up? Let's say left rough. And how far was it from the hole? So let's say 234. And then it's what do we do for the next shot? What did you hit? Let's say I've laid up with the 7-iron and it's ended up in the fairway and it's given me 112 yards, for example. Next shot, and I'm just gonna, obviously I would never miss the green from here, Kevin. You've seen enough of my data, but I did in this case. 15 yards, and because I've missed the green, it's just asking me to specify where did I miss. So this helps us to understand tendencies. And then again, next shot, okay, what club did you use? Lob wedge. And let's say I've actually hit a good shot of 3 feet, and then I'm in the hole. So that's entering a hole, and obviously when you're doing it yourself, you know, whether you're doing it on the golf course or post round, you can skip through that pretty quickly. Importantly, you can save at any point during the round. So it could be a playing lesson, you just go and play 4 or 5 holes. You can still collect that data, you can save it, you get the full analytics. You might be playing match play, you hit 2 shots into the green, the hole's conceded, you can pick up. So you're still getting analytics on the shots that you've hit. So we want to make this as flexible as possible, give players the opportunity to edit hole lengths, all of this stuff as we go through. And the reason we don't use GPS sort of drag and drop, I'm sure a lot of you have seen that, was because of the time it takes for players. The sort of big keys for us were, how do we make it as quick as possible? And how do we provide information that's going to be really valuable afterwards? They're big keys, because they're sort of big pushback points that we've heard for a number of years from players. And
can you show the enhanced, just show a little bit of the enhanced data?
Sure. So I'll just start another round again. Skip through that. So when we're going through the enhanced data, so again, we'll do this and try and recreate. So this is where we put the shape of the hole. Okay, so this is a straight hole.
Right.
For the next shot, let's say we go with the layup again, and so 21, and then this is okay. Are you laying up into certain location? Okay, so I'm laying up short there, and then the next shot. Okay, I'm going to hit that same missed shot to 15 yards, and then we've got a little bit more information. So we're saying it's a back left pin. Maybe I missed long and left as well. And then the next shot, the around the green shot, I'm hitting that lob wedge. I'm hitting onto the green. And we can say it's the same shot, but actually, where did it finish in relation to the hole? So right of the hole, were you short-sided? Yes, I was. No, there wasn't a hazard. What was the lie like? Was it on a side slope? No. And then when we get to the putt, we'll say I'm going to hold that 3-foot putt, but I can also put in what was the break on that putt as well. So that's just a little bit more information there. But obviously, as I showed with the putting, we can start to surface those insights as to tendencies and that sort of stuff. And we're going to be delivering that pretty soon in terms of the approach, the pin positions, shots into certain sections of the greens as well.
Yeah. So I just want everyone to see that. So you can go pretty basic, kind of get it in there, or you can really dive into it, and you can tailor it to the, depending upon the type of information you need for whatever player that you're working with. And I think that's what's interesting about all this is it's, everyone thinks, I get a lot of, you get a lot of mid to high handicappers like, oh, I don't need data. This is only for the good players. Right? How would you guys answer that?
I think it's for currently, I think it's for anybody who is willing to take the journey to be a better player, right? Someone who is correlating their work with their coach with some element of practice and wanting to get better. As long as they have those things in place, and we call them aspirational good players, right? They have those, they can make a lot of value of what's going on here. The ones that I don't think at the moment would find value is that, let me just fix my slice. I'm just trying to get through the round of golf. I'm just trying to get to, have a better time with my buddies. If they're not committed to that, a little bit of work, a little bit of practice, a little bit of accountability, I'm not sure that this is the product that should be in their hands, right? I think if they are that same player who says, I'm shooting 102. God, I'd love to be able, what would it look like? What would my skill need to be a 92? And I'm willing to spend a couple hours a week doing that. I think that player all of a sudden becomes qualified to use the system.
Yeah, I agree. Dave, anything to add to that?
No, I completely agree with that. I think if you're committed to that, then you're going to find value. And I think whether you're using Clipped or any other data, it's just any data you can get is going to be valuable. Whatever as an instructor about a player, then that's going to help you. If you knew nothing, then you're kind of going based off their narrative. If you know what their handicap is, okay, it helps us a little bit more. So I think we're definitely seeing players who are committed, and it's not necessarily by handicap, but by attitude, are finding benefit from this. And we are including some elements which are a little bit lighter, a little bit more fun. Whether it's just being able to follow people, and I kind of show that on here. I can just see what other players I'm connected with can see or are doing, for example. So it creates a little bit more of a social element. We've also got leaderboards around those tests, etc. in there. And we're finding a lot of players, and this is the round I've just put in there. Something that's also added value beyond almost the data is the fact that I can come in here and I can actually just put a few notes in here. I'm never very imaginative in these situations, so I'll just put this as a test, but or even a TET. This is a test, whatever it might be. So I can put some little notes, use it a little bit like a journal. You'd be able to see that as my instructor as well. So that just updates pretty quickly there, and you'll be able to see that. So it's not just the data, there's some of the sort of softer edges on things as well. And that's definitely helping the sort of engagement. And we can see even here, there's just Ben using this like a journal.
Yeah. Let me share my screen for a sec, David.
Of course.
So let me show people hi. Let's see, share. So I've got multiple players on here, and I always like to start out, let me get this out of the way, where I like to get an overview of what everyone's doing, how they're doing. And then if I start to see something like Alice is a player of mine for working for a long time, and I start to see some of these numbers start to dip. So I can just kind of gives me a little bit of an awareness of what's going on as a coach. I'll go into here and kind of look at what's trending, like why is her approach shots dipping more than lower than I'd want to see it. So I can go and see her last few rounds. I can see she's been struggling a little bit with approach shots in around the green. And so for me, I can just reach out to that player and say, hey, Alice, I noticed your stats are a little bit lower than we'd expect. What's going on? And she can say, well, the conditions were bad, or whatever the answer is. So as a coach, it allows me to kind of go in and maybe engage with the player a little bit more than I would if I didn't have this data. I would know how she's doing. Where here I can kind of keep in touch, and so I'm actually going to give her a call right after this this seminar and say what's going on. I noticed
Yeah, Kevin, I think it's a good place to go back to that Teams page. I think this is great for the coaches. So coaches, everyone, if you're a coach and any player that's ultimately connected to you, you get this summary view, and you'd also see all of their activity come through your feed every day, whatever they've been up to. But
right,
in terms of trends, if you go click on that one right next to you on top there, those smaller dots you see on the upper right there, yeah, yeah. This is a really cool. This has been really. This tells a lot of stories for coaches. This is a heat map. And what this is showing is all of Kevin's players, how they are trending in all elements of their game. So green, it's not how good you are, but you're on an upward trend. Anything between, and red is obviously on a negative trend. And everything in between is what that trend is. So if it's slightly red, it's slightly down. If it's slightly green, it's slightly up. This is a great kind of like early intervention tool that coaches are using, like to look at their whole roster of players and go, oh my gosh, Lee is really having, he's at 77, but he's trended down 5 points in the last, how many rounds? Last 25 rounds. And you could skew it by 3 rounds, 10 rounds, 12 rounds, whatever you want to measure it on. But I think this is a great, like, coaches intervention tool. If you have a roster of players that are kind of working on their game, to be able to call them up and say, hey, maybe you should come by and take a lesson. Like, I see we're struggling off the tee today. We're struggling on, your approach play, and the trends are not looking great. Let's jump on it before it gets too severe, right?
Yeah, I mean, the data, it definitely gives you the ability to look at, see what players are doing, and then catch something before it gets really bad. Because maybe they're like this thing with Alice here. She's been -4 and -6 in her around the green in her approach shots. So that's something I don't want to catch right away before it gets into something that's hard to recover from. And sometimes it's just a quick conversation with your player. Like any coach knows that. It's just like, send me a quick video, and it could be just a setup thing. Malice is a high level player. It's usually her distance when the ball gets a little bit off, and then she starts missing it left or right. So we can kind of get into some of this data. And you can see here she's missing it left and right. So we can kind of dive into what she's doing if we need to, and see why, kind of get ahead of it before it gets really bad.
And you could
I
obviously
just wanted to kind of show.
Yeah, sorry, Kevin, you could obviously specify that to a shorter, it's just showing the last 20 rounds, as you see in the sort of upper right there, but you might want to look at those more recent rounds that you were sort of talking about. Maybe you're looking at a shorter period of time, and actually, is there something that's really coming out of those last few rounds? And it's
So these are her last 6 rounds. So we can see she's missing much more right than left, and a little bit short. So we can start to kind of figure things out of what's going on. So you can really just spend a lot of, as a coach, I like to go into this and I like to just start clicking on things and seeing where it takes me. And then I start to kind of put things together, and then I talk to the player about what's going on. If I look at her short game here, these are for her last 6 rounds. So definitely a higher, premium on hitting the fairway. So maybe she's been playing more difficult shots or more difficult courses. I don't know the courses that she's been on, but it just kind of allows me to kind of get into it. And I know for the players, for everyone out there looking at this, it's like, oh my gosh, I don't know what it is. It took me a little bit of time to get used to seeing all the data. There's a lot of information here, and David and John did a few sessions with me to kind of learn how to digest what's going on, and how not to look at it too small or too big, and actually how to look at it. And for me, it actually helped me to look at my own data, because I know my own game. So I kind of go in here and I'll say, oh, okay, these, off the tee, yeah, pretty good driver of the ball. I usually putt fairly well, and
Very balanced.
what do I need to work on?
Balanced game of golf.
Yeah, pretty balanced in there.
Either you're good at everything,
which has come up.
or you really need help everywhere. It's what it's.
I need a little. I'm good at a lot of things and great at nothing. But I've worked on it, because these used to be my approach shots, and my around the green for me used to be much lower, and
Hey,
so
Kevin,
I worked hard on that.
Can you go to a round of golf? Can you go to activities? Can you go click on and what a round of golf looks like? Just click on any round of golf.
This is my last round that I played.
Yeah, and I think, and again, this starts telling the story of every golf hole, right? By this 0 to 200 measure, as you can see on the right-hand side, it's how he's played the round. If you start going into round insights, click on round insights. This middle graph of all of these bars, yeah, exactly there. This is a really interesting tool. This has been a very engaging tool for your players who I think are maybe approaching playing competitive golf or playing some competitive golf. This is a shot tracker. This is every shot that a kid or a player plays within a round of golf, measured on the scale of 0 to 200. And what this does, and what coaches have used it, especially in the college marketplace, they've started to look at the round. They say, well, how are they starting the round? Are we starting off strong? How are we finishing the round? Are they finishing strong? How are they responding to a bad shot? Are they hitting multiple bad shots after the bad shot? How are they doing when they get in momentum and a good run? All of these things, again, all they do is create incredible conversations. So like Georgia Tech, I don't know, you guys know, but they finished second last year in the NCAAs, and we were fortunate enough to have them use the platform. And on the women's side, they actually won the thing using the platform. So the joke is, the day before the championships, Dave, they stopped using the Kevin. They stopped using the app, Georgia Tech. But Coach Hepler saw that my team was getting off to slow starts, and his action, not knowing if it was right or wrong, his action was, oh, maybe we should change the way we're warming up. Maybe we should change our nutrition plan before a round of golf. And the point being is that the information, and then you can measure how you went from there. Okay, we made the change. How are they getting off the starts now? The point being is that the information allows you to take action that is measurable and accountable, and you can revisit it and look at it again. Did it have the positive effect that we were looking at? And I think these elements within the platform are sitting there designed to do just that. This stuff doesn't work without coach. It doesn't work, in my mind, without someone who is there to guide that player along that journey as to how they truly impact these areas of concentration or areas of effort that they should be working on.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love going into this. I always go right to here. What are my worst shots? I had 7 bad shots. What are my worst 3 shots that day? So I hit a poor bunker shot. Missed the fairway from 140 yards with a 9-iron. Oops. And I hit a bad drive. But you can really, I mean, you can.
What were your 3 best shots?
You can really go. My 3 best shots were hold a 15 putt, hold a 10-foot putt, and hit a wedge to 5 feet.
There you go. Tour quality.
There you go.
Well above tour quality.
But you can really, I mean, the data, you can start, I like what you said, you can start to see trends. I mean, this is every shot, but how is my driving for that day? Okay, well, what happened here? I mean, was it a difficult tee shot or was it something else? And this is when you start to have conversations with your players, when you're hitting at approach shots. Yeah, okay, so there's a couple of really poor, some decent ones and some, what was going on here? Well, that's the worst one that I missed. That's when I pulled it.
Yeah, was it?
So you can really, just you can kind of see, you can look at everything, or you can really dive into it and kind of get a picture of what's going on. David, there's a question I think you could answer in there. Do you see that question?
Yeah, hold on a second.
While you pull that up. But so I really like, I mean, just for me, the data, and then, oops, I can't see what's going on here. I hit the wrong. But I like to start here for my players and see what's going on, and it's fairly consistent. And then you can kind of go through each hole and say, okay, here was every shot. I like to sit down with the players on certain rounds, whether it be a good round or a bad round, and just say, hey, what was going on? Like what was going on in your mind on that on this hole, and compare it to another hole where I made a bogey here. Like, well, I hit a bad tee shot, and then how did that maybe I got upset and it affected the next few shots. Then I fortunately I probably saved bogey with my wedge here on this hole. This was PGA West Nicholas, so the 10th hole. Yeah, I hit a bad drive. I remember that hole. I hit a bad drive on this hole. Hooked it left. And then they tried to make a miraculous up and down with a 3-iron. How about that? Try to get it on the green. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that hole, but not a good hole to hit it left on.
Clearly. So yeah, just the question there, Kevin, about the value to the point system. And I guess it depends on a period of time you might be looking at. We do show strokes gained in here as well. So obviously a period of time is going to be important, but if we sort of were broadly comparing it against a strokes gained, for example, and like Rory McIlroy, clear example, 100's that tour average off the tee. He's pretty much a sort of 110 is his baseline. So that's equating to about a shot in terms of strokes gained. So roughly sort of 10 shot quality points would equate to a shot. But obviously it depends on if you're looking at in this example, maybe you've gone down by 4 points. Obviously it depends on how many rounds we're looking at. But I think the key behind the metrics is being able to see those trends super fast. And that's really is the sort of secret sauce behind them. How do we understand you as a player, and actually where are you going and how are you progressing? I think that's the most important thing. And I think what we will add into the platform in time is a sort of forward-looking, okay, if I improve this area by 10 points, what will that equate to in terms of my performance in rounds of golf? So I think it's definitely a question we've been asked, and something we want to make sure that we really sort of do full service to and deliver in a way that's going to be meaningful.
And we've been able to, because we now have enough customers in system, we're able to make comparisons to Division I players, average college players, really good junior players on tour. So we can start doing these other benchmarks. We're going to start adding in, I think we have a 5 handicap. You know, what would a 5 handicap on average look like from a skill level standpoint? Again, everyone plays it differently, but if we kind of added up all those things, what would be the average? So we can start making these comparisons that are relevant. And at some point, you know, it should be like, oh, what is the club championship at Sleepy Hollow? What does he look like? And if I want to be that, what do I need to do? Or if I want to make my high school team, you know, what do those players look like? And what do I need to do to be at least qualified on a skill level standpoint, in terms of playing the game of golf?
Yeah, and one of the beauties of what you guys have built into the program is you can compare yourselves to, if you want to, a tour player or a high level junior or collegiate, you know, D1 or D2 or D3 collegiate player or an LPG, you know, you could see as a benchmark where they are, just to kind of see, you know, how you're doing compared to them. And sometimes you're doing better than you think. And so that's another just feature in there that I really like.
And sometimes,
John, any final thoughts? Anything else to add?
I just, again, this is a product that we ultimately think is relevant to a large portion of the population, the golfing population. I think today, if we're going to be honest with ourselves and honest with where the market acceptance has really been, it's those coaches who have a handful or a large amount of aspiring good players, kids that are aspiring to play high school golf, or kids that are starting the journey thinking that they can play college golf. Or, you know, those are the places that we're finding the most success, because of nothing more than they're the most attentive and they're generally the more early adopters of newer technologies. Like those are components that I think need to exist. And if you have those people, I think if you have those kind of people in your stable of customers, I think you'd be remiss to not use a product like this. We obviously believe ours is the best in marketplace, but there are other products that do add value. I think the differentiator for us is the level of science and the level of transforming stats into really used and valuable information for both coach and player.
Yeah, I agree. David, anything to add?
Yeah, I think we're kind of looking forward to, you know, the ways the market catching up and the technology improving. You know, we've talked about the likes of Arcos and Garmin, and you know, there will be other devices coming forward, because there's so much that we can do with the data, you know, particularly with GPS. You know, we're obviously pretty focused on those, you know, high performing players at the moment who might not be using GPS as much. But when you start to combine health data and GPS, which is time-stamped and location accurate, there's some really cool stuff you can uncover. And I think that's going to be the next phase of things, whereby you might be able to see as an instructor, okay, well, you know, they've been wearing their Apple Watch, we've got heart rate, they've been using Arcos, for example, and actually these shots are happening when there's out of bounds left. Their heart rate's really going through the roof. So it's just helping you to get to points of understanding, whereby you don't have to go down the wrong route, you know, on a couple of times, or go too deep down the wrong route, where you can really try to accelerate that process, just make it much more efficient. So we're pretty excited about where that can take us. And, you know, we've been able to sort of uncover a few of those things up to this point already, just through testing. And I think that's going to be, you know, huge value if we can cut down that time of understanding those scenarios. It's going to be valuable for players. It's going to be valuable for instructors as well.
And Kevin, just make sure that our emails are accessible and kind of sent out to the group. We'll set up demo. Anybody want to explore further? We gain as much value from those conversations as, you know, as hopefully you do. So we love those interactions.
we'll have Emily or Caitlin make that accessible to everybody in the section. Look, for me as a coach, my good friend James Lynch said that, why guess when you can measure? And so just even if players just did it on a very broad spectrum, just to have some data is better than no data. And so having data like having this data that you can look at it in a macro level or really dive deep into it is, for me as a coach, is super helpful. And it's just, so hopefully everybody out there learns a little bit more about data, what to look at, different things that we can, that are out there, and different things that you guys can do. David and Jonathan, I both appreciate your support for our section and everything that, and support that you've done for me. So I appreciate it. Hope everyone, if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to me and everyone out there. If you have my email. And we appreciate your time, and we look forward to having a great season and collecting more data for everybody, getting everybody better.
Kevin, thank you for the platform. We really appreciate the opportunity to speak to the group, and we hope to see you all out there doing your thing, and any way we can help, we're there to do it. So thanks.
You're welcome. Thank you.